Keeping safety front of mind is all about communication. Welcome to the Farm Safety Roundup, a podcast series focused on important conversations to help keep farmers, their families, and their workers safe. Farm Safety Roundup is brought to you by the agricultural team at Workplace Safety and Prevention Services. With today's timely topic, I'm your host, Shaun Haney. Let's get to it. Welcome to another episode of the Farm Safety Roundup, brought to you by Workplace Safety and Prevention Services. You know, Canadian Agricultural Safety Week, the annual nationwide initiative delivered by the Canadian Agricultural Safety Association, it's wrapped up for another year. But raising awareness about the importance of safe agriculture is something that justifies a spotlight year-round. As a health and safety consultant with Workplace Safety and Prevention Services, and also a farmer, I might add, Ryan Dick talks about safety every day. In fact, Ryan is out in the field today working with a farm operation in Dundas, Ontario. Welcome back to the Farm Safety Roundup, Ryan.
Thanks for having me, Shaun.
This year, the focus for Farm Safety Week was on providing practical safety advice and encouraging conversations about farm safety while showcasing how safety directly contributes to the success and sustainability of farming operations. Really, when we think about this episode, safety is it is our heritage. We welcome your farm, your family, and your success, and that's what we'll be talking about today on the Farm Safety Roundup. Okay, Ryan, now we know there's a high rate of lost time injuries in the sector, and they can take a real devastating toll. This is something that farmers are really dealing with. But the main thing is that many of the incidents are really preventable. So talk about farm safety as it ties to being preventative.
Well, as you said, we do have a very dangerous sector. A lot of injuries in it, but as mentioned, a lot of the injuries are preventable. One of the biggest issues is we tend not to think through the task. It'd be nice if we stop, think, act before we do anything. But being aware of the hazards associated with the task is a primary concern. Every worker has a right to know about their hazards, and the farm isn't any different at all. Every farmer has a responsibility to protect their workers by making them aware of the hazards and the dangers of doing their job. And honestly, on most farms, if we can increase our communication, we would have a better internal responsibility system, which would in turn create a safer work environment and a safer culture. So as with many of the incidences, they are preventable through training is the best way to do that. So better training is safer employers or safer employees. And so the best way to prevent injuries going forward is to implement new safety procedures as you get updates on the farm, and also to improve existing ones. Just because we've written it once doesn't mean we're one and done. We do have to reevaluate and modify to make sure they're still accurate.
You know, and as I think about it, as you're talking about that, I can think of a lot of, what we call like close calls, right? And sometimes we're in a group of farmers, we talk about some of those close calls, and it's a learning opportunity as opposed to just being story time. But when we look at those close calls or close misses, most of us have gone through them. What can we learn from these as we reflect on our own and ones that other farmers have told us about?
Well, as you mentioned, we all have our stories to tell. You put a group of farmers in a room and everybody's going to have a story to tell about a near miss or a situation that happened on their farm. But it is, as you say, important to learn from these misses. Too often we scratch off a near miss as a lucky break, and nothing really changes to prevent it from happening again. We've pat ourselves on the back. We're happy that we got away from that one, but we really don't take actions to prevent that from happening again. A lot of the time, the other issue about the near misses that we don't learn from is a lot of the time they're not reported by the employee, whether that be through embarrassment or fear of reporting an issue to the employer. So it's important to understand the risks of the near misses, to consider the consequences if it does happen again, and determine the root cause of why it almost happened. It's important to understand that the root cause really has to be addressed here. Is it a training issue that we didn't learn from, or is it a communication that wasn't properly identified, or perhaps it's an education thing? So you really have to have ways of considering, or you need to consider ways to control those near misses on the farm. And we need to see a change in the shift of the safety culture on our farms. We need to encourage better and open dialogue for the IRS and adopt attitudes that make learning and adjusting how we do our practices part of the daily routines.
When we think about they're very preventative, the one I'm thinking of for me personally was, I remember one time, late teens, driving a swather, very, very tired around harvest time, almost fell asleep and almost drove it off a coulee edge, and happened to wake up, or get out of it just at the right time. Very, very preventative. Dummy me should have stopped when I was so tired and just had a nap. Right?
It's easier said than done at times. Sometimes we really don't consider what has to be done as far as our abilities to complete those.
Yeah, for sure. Now, farming has unique risks to family and as well as workers. Talk about some of those unique risks.
Well, one of the biggest unique risks in farming that's not in most other industries is the fact that the workplace has dual functions. In the farm, the workplace is both a place of business and home residence. So often there's kids, elderly, visitors, they're all at risk on a daily basis. So not only do we have to train our employees to be aware of the dangers, the hazards of the equipment and the processes they're working, we need to train them to be aware that kids love sounds. The kids love the tractors. And just because there's nobody around when you start the task doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be the same way. So it's important to understand that visitors and children will not know the procedures that you and your farm employees know. So when you are carrying out hazard assessments on the farm, they need to be carried out with children in mind as well. Employees also need to be trained how to do their tasks safely. And be able to approach and give a good example is one of the biggest issues as far as leading by example. If we're showing our kids it's okay to step over a PTO shaft, that's exactly what those kids are going to be doing. So you really have to take that into consideration. And one of the hardest things to do is to establish those boundaries, to provide supervision to our kids on the farm, teach hazard awareness from an early age. And as I mentioned, lead from example, because the kids take cues from the workers and they'll absorb the safety culture they witness.
Yeah. Well, hey, Ryan, a good example is kids and adults, you too. Like, we think about distracted driving with phones. It also applies when we're operating equipment or being around equipment on the farm too, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned, it's not just kids. To be honest, all of us as farmers, also as people who will once in a while check that phone when maybe we shouldn't be. But it's really important to understand that the kids don't necessarily have the same awareness that we have. They have not got the life experiences that we've got to get us to this point that unfortunately sometimes get us out of those distracted situations. So the kids have so many risks they need to be aware of. Especially by the cell phones, as you mentioned, whether the phone be ringing, whether it's messaging with their friends, Googling things, or just taking photos. It's very important to stress situational and hazard awareness to all the kids, especially again, with teenagers, and not wanting to signal them out, but brains are still developing at that point in time. The parts that control how teens react to situations is typically one of the last parts of the brain to develop. So it's pretty easy to get complacent with the young children and give them the tablets. But you need to understand that they're going to get bored eventually, especially if there's a service interruption, and they will wander around. And the technology, as nice as it is as a babysitter once in a while, offers a huge, unique set of risks through complacency, especially.
Yeah.
And yeah, you find yourself caught in the moment and zone out.
Yeah, we've all been there for sure. And Ryan, a part of this too, when it comes to safety, and I gave my example, I was exhausted, I was tired. It's a good example though of not taking care of myself. And I know that you're a big proponent of farmers really needing to take care of you, so to speak, themselves, and taking that time for themselves as well. Talk about that.
And that's a great theory that we all need to somehow put into practice. But in my experience, farmers are taking care of everyone else except themselves. For some reason, our productivity and accomplishment seem to be tied to our self-worth, and we are super hard on ourselves when our performance levels are affected. We'll put undue pressure and stressor on ourselves with a never-ending workload. Also, it's getting harder and harder to find regular and qualified help So we seem to take a lot of those more pressures on ourselves. It's very important that we start looking at ourselves and our mental health and physical health the same way we're starting to look at our equipment. You're not going to take your seed drill out to the field in the spring if you haven't gone over it either the fall or the spring, and that's the preventative maintenance. Well, we have to start treating ourselves the same way and treating it like preventative maintenance, because it's a lot cheaper to head problems off rather than just to deal with the problems. So it's very important that we have to understand that both our physical and our mental health are super important. One affects the other and vice versa. And if one is out of harmony, both are going to suffer for it. So it's super important to take time for yourself as a farmer, which is easier said than done. It's not always going to be something along the lines of a 2-week vacation, but it could be 20 minutes in the pastures with a newborn to really reset your mental state and your mind. It could just be family dinner at night. And sometimes we just have to set aside our entire to-do list and prioritize our time for the tasks that will benefit us and the farm the most, even if it means not working for the day, which is extremely difficult for us to acknowledge. One of the key things that we have to keep in mind is our farm success is directly dependent on our well-being as a farmer. And if we are not taking care of ourselves, not being able to see the forest for the trees, we're going to continue to make knee-jerk decisions that make more work for ourselves because we are not giving ourselves the downtime to really rest and recoup for that.
Ryan, when it comes to health and safety, is some of this related to how you define success as well? Talk about that a little bit.
Well, success is one of those words that means a lot of different things depending who you're talking to. Typically, success is measured by things like salary, job titles, or accomplishments in the grand scheme of things. But success on the farm really doesn't meet those criteria. They're typically not the metrics that we determine success with in our minds. But success varies. It's going to vary from farm to farm and from year to year. If you're a beef breeder, success may mean winning a masterclass status. To a grain farmer, success may mean getting a double crop off successfully or reducing your input costs without sacrificing yield. And for a pig farmer this year, success may mean being a farm at the end of the year. So it's very important that we understand that we have to adjust what our goals are for success and what our levels, satisfactory levels would be on that. My view of success is being able to come home in one piece to my family every night with enough money on the table to put some food on the table, as well as some leftovers to maybe have some enjoyment. Our view at WSPS of success is being able to come home, as I said, every night safe and sound. And regardless of what your view of success is, there's a few things that help you get you there on the farm. One of those things is putting health and safety at the forefront. Because if you're not around to enjoy your success, what point is having success? And in order to accomplish that, put things like the stop, think, act into effect. Adopt and encourage open communication on the farm. Encourage the workers to report concerns. Encourage workers to contribute to a better safety culture and lead by example, as I've mentioned a few times. What we do will speak way louder than what we say to our employees, so it's very important we set by example on that. If you ignore safety, your workers will ignore safety. If you adopt safety and implement a health and safety and internal responsibility system into the daily activities, you're already on the path to success because you've eliminated so many downfalls and pitfalls about lost time and injuries.
Oh, well put, Ryan. Hey, Ryan, thanks for joining us for another episode here of the Farm Safety Roundup. Really appreciate it.
I really appreciate you having me, Shaun. It's great to be here.
Okay, for tips and tools and free and easy to use resources, make sure you stop at wsps.ca/farm safety. With agricultural expertise to help keep farmers, their families, and their workers safe, Farm Safety Roundup is a podcast series produced by Real Agriculture with the team of ag specialists at Workplace Safety and Prevention Services. Go to the website wsps.ca/farm safety. There you're going to find free health and safety resources, and you'll also be able to check this episode's show notes for information on the topics discussed. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time to talk all things farm safety right here on the Farm Safety Roundup.